The wind howled across the ruins of what had once been a thriving village. Smoke curled lazily from the blackened remains of homes, and the scent of ash hung heavy in the air. Every tree was charred, every field scorched, and the cries of the living were nowhere to be heard. Only silence remained, broken occasionally by the distant, earth-shaking roar of something massive. Elias crouched behind a broken wall, his breath shallow, his eyes scanning the horizon. The wind tugged at his tattered cloak, and the firelight from the burning ruins flickered across his dead-streaked face. He was the last human left in these lands. At least, that's what everyone said. Legend spoke of the ancient dragon, a creature older than kingdoms, larger than mountains, and crueler than death itself. It had wiped out entire armies, reduced cities to cinders, and burned the hopes of humanity to nothing. No one survived its wrath, until now. Elias had survived, but barely. He tightened his grip on the small satchel at his side, careful not to disturb its fragile contents. Inside was a weapon unlike anything the world had seen in centuries, a strange, glowing sword, etched with symbols that pulsed faintly with light. He didn't know how it worked, only that it had been left for him, hidden in the rubble of the village's temple. Some ancient hope, some last chance. Elias paused and listened. The roar came again, louder this time, shaking the ground beneath his feet. Dust fell from the ruined walls, and the air seemed to vibrate with the dragon's presence. Somewhere in the distance, it moved, its enormous wings slicing through the air with a force that could flatten mountains. He knew he couldn't stay here. Every second wasted was a second closer to being found. The dragon had a sense for humans, or at least, it hunted anything that moved. He slipped across the scorched earth, careful to step only on shadows, weaving between the skeletons of what had been homes. In the distance, Elias caught sight of a bridge spanning a deep, blackened ravine. Its supports had burned, leaving only a narrow path. One misstep and he would fall to the river below, or worse, be crushed by a falling beam. He inched forward, heart hammering, the glow from the sword barely illuminating the charred stones ahead. As he crossed, he remembered the stories his grandfather had told him when he was a boy. Tales of dragons so powerful that no sword could pierce their scales, of fire that could melt stone, of a world where humans were nothing but insects beneath their claws. But stories were easy to dismiss when you had parents, friends, and a village to protect. Now, only survival remained. Halfway across the bridge, a shadow passed over him. Elias froze, every muscle locked. The ground trembled beneath him. He looked up and saw it, the ancient dragon. Its scales glimmered like molten metal, its eyes like twin suns of fury. It was perched on a cliff, massive wings folded but still towering above everything around it. Its gaze swept the landscape with precision, as if it could see his heartbeat from a mile away. Elias ducked behind a broken pillar, trying not to breathe. The dragon's nostrils flared, and a low growl rolled from deep within its chest. It had smelled him. The hunter had found its prey. He reached into his satchel and gripped the sword tightly. The strange symbols on its blade pulsed brighter, as though aware of the dragon's presence. A shiver ran down Elias' spine, not of fear, but of anticipation. This was the moment he had been preparing for, even if he didn't fully understand why he was still alive. The dragon leapt. Its wings unfurled, and the roar shattered the air. Elias dove to the side as fire erupted where he had stood moments before. The heat singed his cloak, but the sword seemed to absorb the light, glowing even brighter. He scrambled across the rubble, heart racing, searching for cover. In the distance, he spotted the remains of the temple. It had survived more intact than most buildings, its walls cracked but still standing. If anywhere held secrets from humanity's past, it was there. He ran, ignoring the flames that licked at his heels, ignoring the roar that followed him like the end of the world. Inside the temple, he finally paused, gasping for breath. The sword's glow illuminated the carved walls, ancient symbols telling stories of battles long forgotten, of heroes who had dared to defy dragons. Elias placed a hand on one of the carvings, feeling the cold stone beneath his fingers. Somehow, this place was meant for him, meant for this moment. Outside, the dragon circled. Its shadow passed over the temple repeatedly, a predator toying with its prey. Elias could feel its presence even inside the stone walls. He didn't know how he would fight it, didn't know if he could, but he knew one thing. He would not run. Not anymore. Humanity might have fallen, but its last son was still standing. The dragon roared again, louder this time, shaking the temple. Elias raised the sword, its glow reflecting in his determined eyes. The night was dark, the air thick with smoke, and somewhere deep in the shadows, the beast waited. And for the first time in centuries, humanity had a chance. The sky above the valley darkened as twilight approached, but the air itself seemed alive with tension. Every leaf that trembled, every stone that shifted, was a whisper in the dragon's senses. From its perch atop the jagged cliffs, the ancient dragon observed the land below, wings half-spread, body coiled like a living fortress of muscle and scale. Its eyes, golden and ancient, scanned the horizon. Smoke drifted from the ruined village, a telltale sign that a human still dared move in its territory. One heartbeat, one faint scent, and the dragon knew there was a survivor. It flexed its talons, the sound of cracking stone echoing across the valley. Centuries had sharpened its instincts. It had destroyed armies that outnumbered it 1,000 to 1, yet something in the air felt different tonight. A trace of defiance, a whisper of courage. The dragon's nostrils flared, detecting the faint iron scent of blood and sweat mingled with something else, something unfamiliar. Interesting, it rumbled in its mind, a voice that resonated more like thunder than words. It had never before faced an opponent who dared approach its lair alone. The dragon's wings lifted, casting a shadow that swallowed the forest, and with a single powerful beat, it launched into the air. Below, Elias moved carefully through the charred remains of the village. Each step was measured, silent, deliberate. The glow of the sword in his satchel pulsed faintly, as if warning him, and he felt it hum with energy that he didn't fully understand. He paused at the edge of the burned bridge, looking up at the cliffs beyond. Then, the shadow passed over him. Elias froze. His chest tightened. The air vibrated with the dragon's presence before it even landed. The ground shook, sending dust and ash swirling around him. He could hear the immense heartbeat of the beast in the earth itself. From the cliffs, the dragon's roar shattered the air, a sound so deep and powerful it felt as though it could rip the lungs from his chest. Flames licked at the edges of the sky as the dragon flexed its wings, and the valley seemed to shrink under its gaze. Elias ducked behind a pile of rubble, clutching the sword. He had survived this long, not through strength, but by being invisible, by being clever. He couldn't match the dragon's size or firepower. Not yet. The dragon descended, claws slicing into the blackened soil, sending shards of stone into the air. Every movement was deliberate, precise, terrifying. It was the embodiment of death incarnate. The dragon's head swung, and its eyes locked onto Elias. It sniffed, and the air grew hotter, the scent of smoke blending with the foul tang of brimstone. "Show yourself, human," it rumbled, its voice shaking the mountains. "You are no ordinary prey." Elias swallowed hard. He wanted to scream, to run, but something in his chest refused. He tightened his grip on the sword. The symbols on its blade flared brighter, as if sensing the dragon's power. He didn't know why, but he felt the first flicker of hope since the world had burned. The dragon lunged. Its massive claws tore into the earth where Elias had stood moments before, throwing him off balance. Fire spat from its mouth, scorching the ground and sending a wave of heat over him. Elias rolled, feeling the searing heat singe his cloak. He rose, adrenaline pumping, heart hammering like a drum of war. This wasn't a battle he could win with brute force. He needed cunning. He darted toward the temple ruins, weaving between fallen beams and rubble, drawing the dragon closer into the crumbling streets. Every step was a gamble. One miscalculation could end him. The dragon followed with terrifying precision, snapping its jaws and slashing with talons that could crush stone. Yet something puzzled it. The human was fast, more agile than expected. It had anticipated fleeing prey, but this one moved like a predator, calculating, daring, defiant. Elias ducked into the temple's inner courtyard. The air here felt different, charged, as if the walls themselves remembered a time when humans held power. He glanced at the glowing sword. The light now seemed almost alive, reacting to the dragon's approach. The dragon landed outside the courtyard, wings folding slowly, its massive head peering in. Flames curled from its nostrils, casting flickering light across the temple walls. "You think to hide, human. You think you can challenge me." Elias raised the sword. "I don't think," he said, voice trembling but firm. "I know." For a brief moment, silence reigned. Even the wind seemed to pause, as though the world itself was holding its breath. Then the dragon roared, louder than ever, shaking the very foundations of the temple. Dust fell from the ceiling, and Elias' heart pounded as he prepared for the first strike of the night. Somewhere deep in the shadows, a faint pulse of energy from the sword spread across the temple floor. Elias didn't fully understand it, but instinct told him it was the key to surviving this night. The ancient dragon crouched, muscles coiled, fire shimmering along its scales. Elias tightened his grip, raising the sword. Outside, the night deepened, the world trembling under the presence of a creature older than memory, and one human daring to defy it. The war had begun. The temple courtyard shivered under the dragon's presence. Every shadow seemed alive, every stone a witness to the impending battle. Elias tightened his grip on the glowing sword, the runes along its blade now pulsating steadily, almost like a heartbeat. He could feel the energy humming through him, a strange warmth against the chill of fear that clung to his bones. The dragon's eyes, twin molten suns, locked onto him. A low growl rolled from deep within its chest, shaking the walls of the temple. Human, it rumbled, each word vibrating through the air like a hammer strike. You stand in the ruin of your kind. Why? Elias swallowed, his voice steady despite the quiver in his chest. Because someone has to. A beat of silence passed, but it was broken almost instantly. The dragon's massive claws dug into the courtyard floor, sending cracked spiderwebbing outward. Dust and rubble erupted around him. Then, with a deafening roar, the dragon lunged forward, wings unfurling to blot out the dim twilight. The ground shook under its weight. Elias rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding the swipe of claws that could have shattered bones like twigs. Heat from the dragon's fire licked at his face, singeing hair and cloak. The glowing sword in his hands flared brighter, casting long, trembling shadows across the temple walls. Somehow, it seemed to respond to the dragon's attack, guiding him, empowering him. He scrambled to his feet and darted between broken pillars, slashing at the dragon with quick, precise strikes. The sword met scale with a ringing clang that echoed unnaturally, almost as if the weapon itself laughed at the dragon's arrogance. Sparks flew, but the dragon barely flinched. Its scales were harder than stone, almost impervious to conventional attack. The dragon reared back, inhaling deeply, and a wave of fire erupted from its mouth. Elias dove into the shadows, the flames roaring past him, leaving smoldering scorch marks in the stone. His lungs burned from the heat, his heart pounding. He knew he couldn't face this beast the way humans had always fought, through strength alone. He needed strategy, cunning, anything the dragon wouldn't anticipate. The sword pulsed in his hands, and a thought struck him. This was not just a weapon, it was a tool, a key to something ancient. He remembered the carvings on the temple walls, the stories etched in stone of humans who had once fought dragons with more than brute force. Perhaps this sword was the last remnant of that knowledge. Elias baited the dragon forward, dodging and weaving through the courtyard. He led it closer to the inner sanctum of the temple, where the ground was unstable, scarred with the remnants of collapsed beams and shattered walls. One misstep by the dragon, and it could be trapped, even slowed, giving Elias a chance. The dragon's roar echoed like thunder, vibrating the very stones beneath him. It struck again, claws sweeping, wings smashing against columns, fire spitting indiscriminately. Elias ducked behind a toppled pillar, breathing hard, sweat stinging his eyes. His chest ached, but he refused to look away. Then, in a sudden moment, he saw it, a weakness. The dragon's left wing had a small scar near the joint, a mark from battle centuries ago. It was barely noticeable, but it gave him hope. If he could distract the dragon, lure it closer, perhaps the sword could reach it. He darted from cover, shouting, drawing the dragon's gaze. "Over here," he yelled, voice cracking yet defiant. The dragon's head snapped toward him, eyes narrowing. It lunged, and Elias rolled under the massive claw, slashing upward instinctively. The sword struck the wing, sparks flying. The dragon roared in pain, a sound that shook the valley. For the first time, Elias realized that he could hurt it. The dragon staggered back, flapping its wings to maintain balance. It let out a deafening screech, wings beating like a storm, sending Elias tumbling across the courtyard. Dust filled his lungs, and his vision blurred, but the glowing sword remained steady in his grip. As Elias rose, he realized the sword was changing. Symbols along the blade now glowed brighter, forming a pattern he hadn't seen before. It was as if the weapon itself was responding to the dragon, awakening for the first time in centuries. He felt a surge of power, a connection to something larger than himself, something that had been waiting for this very moment. The dragon, sensing the shift, froze mid-step. Its golden eyes narrowed, and a low, guttural growl rumbled through the temple. "So, you can fight," it said, voice thick with disbelief. "Perhaps humans are not as weak as I believed." Elias didn't answer. He raised the sword, feeling the energy flow through his arms, into his chest, into his very soul. Tonight, this battle would decide more than survival. It would decide whether humanity's legacy ended with him, or whether one last spark could ignite a new dawn. The dragon reared, wings spread, ready to strike again. Elias steadied himself, eyes locked on it. The first true clash of legends was about to erupt, and the night was far from over. The war had begun in earnest. The temple courtyard was a war zone. Stones lay shattered, pillars splintered, and the air was thick with smoke and the scent of scorched earth. Elias crouched behind a toppled wall, chest heaving, sweat dripping from his brow. The glow of the sword in his hands pulsed steadily, a heartbeat that mirrored his own. The dragon circled above, wings like mountains in motion, shadowing the courtyard. Its roar shook the stones beneath him, a challenge and a warning. "You dare strike at me, a human," it bellowed, voice echoing across the valley. "You are nothing." Elias swallowed, pain and fear clawing at him, but he refused to look away. He had survived this long through wit and courage, and now the sword in his hand seemed to hum with recognition, as if sensing the moment it had been waiting for. He rose to his feet. The dragon's gaze followed every movement, calculating, anticipating. One swipe of its claws could end him. One breath of fire could reduce the courtyard to ash. Yet Elias did not flinch. The sword began to glow brighter, runes tracing lines along its length, forming a pattern that pulsed with energy. A warmth spread through Elias' body, strengthening his muscles, steadying his breath. He realized, with a shock, that the weapon was not just a sword. It was a relic of power, designed to rival even the might of dragons. The dragon lunged. Its claws carved deep grooves into the courtyard floor, and fire erupted from its maw, scorching the stone and sending Elias sprawling. He rolled to the side, the heat searing his cloak, but he rose quickly, sword raised. The runes along its blade flared even brighter, illuminating the dark corners of the temple. Elias took a deep breath, centering himself. He had one chance. He sprinted forward, dodging the dragon's sweeping claws, and aimed for the scar joint on its left wing, a weakness he had discovered in their previous clash. The dragon reacted instantly, swiping with its tail, a massive strike that sent Elias tumbling across the courtyard. Dust and stone rained down around him, but he rose again, determination burning in his eyes. The sword pulsed in response to the dragon's presence, as if guiding him, lending him strength. He leapt, slashing at the dragon's wing. Sparks flew as steel met scale, and for a brief moment, the dragon roared in surprise and pain. It staggered back, its wings beating furiously to regain balance. Elias landed, chest heaving, eyes fixed on the enormous beast before him. Then the sword changed. The glowing runes spiraled outward, forming a circle of light around Elias. Energy surged from the blade, crackling through the air, sending shockwaves that made the dragon stagger. Elias felt a sudden connection, not just to the sword, but to the very essence of the temple, to the legacy of humanity that had once fought dragons and lived. The dragon's eyes widened, a mixture of fury and disbelief. "What is this?" it growled. Fire erupted from its mouth, more intense, more desperate, but the shockwave from the sword deflected the flames harmlessly into the air. Elias felt the energy flowing through him, amplifying every movement, every thought, every heartbeat. With a roar, Elias charged, the sword cutting through the air with an almost sentient precision. He struck at the dragon's wing again, this time with the full force of the weapon's power. The scale cracked, a streak of molten light running across the wing. The dragon shrieked, staggering, claws digging into the ground as it fought to stay upright. The courtyard trembled, stones crumbling, smoke swirling like a storm. Elias pressed forward, energy from the sword radiating outward, creating a protective field around him. Every instinct, every training, every ounce of courage he had was amplified. He was no longer just a man. He was the embodiment of humanity's last defiance. The dragon lunged again, this time fully enraged, wings beating a tempest, fire surging like a river of molten rock. But Elias met it head-on. The sword met fire and scale, energy exploding outward, shaking the temple walls and sending both combatants reeling. For the first time, the dragon faltered. Its wings trembled, its roar was strained, and the golden eyes that had once burned with absolute confidence now flickered with doubt. This was not supposed to happen. No human had ever challenged it. Not like this. Elias, breathing hard, steadied himself. He could feel the sword thrumming, sensing the dragon's weakness. One final strike, he realized, could turn the tide. Humanity had been beaten, banned, and broken, but this moment, this night, could change everything. The dragon's roar echoed one last time, a warning and a challenge, as it prepared for another strike. But Elias didn't hesitate. He raised the sword high, its light now blinding, and prepared to deliver the attack that could end the dragon's reign, and perhaps end the war that had ravaged the world for centuries. The night was alive with energy, with fire, with the pulse of the last human standing against a creature older than memory. The battle had escalated beyond survival. It had become a test of legacy, of courage, and of the will to defy fate itself. And in that moment, as the dragon reared, wings unfurling like mountains, Elias knew that everything depended on what came next. The temple courtyard had become a battlefield unlike any the world had seen. Smoke choked the air, and jagged stones jutted from the scorched earth. The dragon's roar had faded into a growl of fury and disbelief. Its massive wings trembled, its golden eyes flickering with doubt for the first time in centuries. Elias stood in the center of the chaos, sword glowing brighter than ever. The runes etched along the blade pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat, and energy radiated from it like a living force. He felt it in his bones. The sword was not just a weapon. It was a conduit for the power of humanity itself, a spark of defiance passed down through the ages. The dragon lunged once more, claws striking with the force of a falling mountain. Fire erupted in waves, scorching the stones around Elias. He dodged, rolling to the side, and for a moment, time seemed to slow. He could see the immense detail of the dragon's scales, the molten glint of its eyes, the sheer weight of its wings poised to crush him. But Elias no longer felt fear. Not truly. The sword thrummed in his hands, filling him with focus, with clarity, with purpose. Every step, every breath, every heartbeat aligned with the rhythm of the weapon. Humanity's last chance rested in his grip, and he would not fail. The dragon's roar shook the heavens, and it unleashed a torrent of fire directly at him. Elias sprinted forward, the glowing sword cutting through the flames like water through air. He leapt, using the momentum to strike at the dragon's chest, aiming for the weak point near its heart that had been glimpsed in centuries-old carvings. The sword struck true. A shockwave of light and sound erupted from the blade, pushing the dragon backward. It screeched, the sound tearing through the valley, shaking the remaining walls of the temple. Flames and energy collided, the sky illuminated with the clash of fire and light. The dragon thrashed, wings beating frantically, but its movements were slower, less precise. Elias pressed forward, feeling the sword guide him, showing him the flow of the battle. Every strike chipped away at the dragon's defenses. Sparks flew as blade met scale, energy pulsed through the courtyard, and the ground beneath them fractured from the sheer force of their struggle. The dragon reared, trying to strike Elias one last time, but the sword's power surged, creating a protective aura around him. He lunged, aiming for the dragon's exposed flank, striking with everything he had left. The blade sank into the scales, energy cascading outward, and the dragon let out a final, deafening roar. Time seemed to freeze. The courtyard shook violently, stones cracking, fire and smoke swirling into the sky. The dragon faltered, wings folding, talons scraping the ground as its massive body trembled. Elias stood tall, sword raised high, its light cutting through the darkness, pure and brilliant. Then the dragon collapsed. Its roar faded into a low, trembling hiss. Smoke rose from its scorched scales as it lay still, massive eyes closing. The weight of centuries of terror, power, and rage seemed to drain from the air. Silence fell over the valley, broken only by Elias' heavy breathing and the distant echo of falling stones. He dropped to his knees, exhausted, the glow from the sword slowly dimming. The battle was over. Humanity's last defender had survived, and the creature that had ruled the world with fire and fear for centuries lay defeated. Elias looked around at the ruined temple, at the scorched valley, and for the first time allowed himself a moment of reflection. The world was broken, yes, But it was not lost. He had survived when all others had perished, and with him, hope remained. Humanity's legacy had not ended. It had endured in one last spark. As dawn began to break, the first light of morning cutting through the smoke, Elias stood. The sword, now glowing faintly, was a symbol of what had been achieved: defiance, courage, and the unyielding will of one human against a force thought invincible. He knew the road ahead would be difficult. The lands were in ruins, and the people were gone. But he also knew that if one human could defy a dragon, one spark could ignite a new dawn. He turned toward the horizon, feeling the weight of centuries on his shoulders, but also the light of possibility in his chest. The night had ended, the war was over, and the world was his to rebuild. Somewhere in the distance, a faint rumble echoed, not of the dragon, but of the earth itself, as if acknowledging the victory of humanity's last son. Elias smiled faintly, eyes fixed on the rising sun. He was the last human, yes, but he was alive, and for the first time in centuries, he was free. And as the first rays of sunlight touched the scorched valley, Elias whispered to the wind, "This is only the beginning." The ancient dragon was defeated. Humanity had survived its darkest night, and one human, armed with courage and an ancient weapon, had proven that even the mightiest foe could fall when met with determination, strategy, and heart. The war had ended in one night, but the legend of the last human would echo through history, a tale of defiance, hope, and the unbreakable will to survive.